The Cardinals have added a key player back to their lineup ahead of their series in Arizona, and KMOV's Brendan Schaefer joins us today to talk about that and more on today's episode of Locked On Cardinals.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily St. Louis Cardinals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Cardinals fans. I'm JD Hafford, and I'm a national radio sports anchor, born and raised in the Lou, and a lifetime Cardinals fan. And I'm your host for Locked On Cardinals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. You can follow me on Twitter, X at JD Sports Radio, as well as the podcast at LO_Cardinals. We want to thank those of you who make Locked On Cardinals your first listen every day, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Interact with us and hit that notification button so you know when new episodes are posted. This is a show serving Cardinal Nation and giving the best fans in baseball all of the info about the birds on the bat. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose by visiting FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. So the Cardinals head back out on the road. They're going to be in Arizona this weekend, and joining us to talk about things today is Cardinals writer for KMOV, Brendan Schaefer, who not only covers the Cardinals for Channel 4, but also got his own podcast. I don't know if you guys have seen it yet. If you haven't, you're missing out because he really goes into a lot of information. Very, very well done, which we're going to link in the description. We've got it in the show notes as well. And you can follow him at bschaefer12 on Twitter X. But a pleasure to finally have you on the show to talk some ball, Brendan. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, JD, I'm doing good, man. It's finally good to be on the show with you. I see what you're doing on Locked On and YouTube and everything. And I thought, man, I got to do something like that. So I've been kind of trying my hand as well the last year or so. But appreciate you having me on to talk some Cardinals today. Going to be a lot of fun.
Nah, I've enjoyed your work thoroughly, not only on the podcast side, but also on the writing side. So if you guys haven't checked him out yet, make sure you do that. Lars Nootbaar is back, Brendan, which is great news. He's been out since March 2nd after fracturing those two ribs on the left side of his body when he jabbed himself in the ribs while he's trying to make a catch in spring training. Got activated off the IL yesterday. Ahead of this West Coast road trip that the Cardinals start tonight with the three-game series in Arizona. To make room on the roster for Nootbaar, catcher Pedro Pages was optioned to AAA Memphis. The return of Noot to the clubhouse, because we know what kind of charisma he brings, and of course his abilities in the lineup, should be a significant impact on things moving forward here. Agree or disagree? As long as he can stay on the field and quit hurting himself.
Yeah, man, and that was a weird injury. You kind of laugh and chuckle because it is like, how in the heck do you even do that? But that's kind of been the story for Noot the last couple of years. You remember opening day last year, he jammed his thumb going into third base and was out for a while because it's just like one freak injury after the next. And so with Noot, yeah, you got to keep him on the field. The talent is undeniable. And the last couple of years, what he's been able to do offensively with a real nice on-base percentage, starting to maybe see a little bit more power creep into his game. I think that's a goal for him coming into 2024 as he gets that season started a little bit later than he would have hoped, but only a couple of weeks after the beginning of the season. I agree with you, though, for a Cardinals offense that has struggled, a lot of games where you look at the end of the 9 innings and it's a 3 for the Cardinals, and you maybe might like to see a 4 or a 5 or a 6 in that run column. Perhaps Nootbaar is a guy that can hit near either the top or the middle of the lineup, bring another lefty into the fold that can maybe help jumpstart an offense that's been a little bit lacking early going.
Now, that's one thing I want to ask you. Where do you prefer to see, and I know it's kind of matchup oriented from time to time, but where do you like to see Lars in the lineup? Are you somebody that prefers him in the bottom half, like, 5 or lower? Do you like to see him at the top of the order? Because personally, I get excited about the idea of such tough at-bats from him and Brendan Donovan at the top of the order. Like, to go through those two to start a game and have to see those two more times than not, ahead of guys like Goldschmidt and Arenado and Nolan Gorman. I like that idea, but what are your thoughts on that?
And I totally understand where Ollie Marmol is coming from when the preference is to kind of line up your batting order in a way that makes it more difficult for the opposing manager to beat you with relief pitchers. So we're talking about the left, right that they have tried to stagger throughout their lineup. I get where he's coming from. However, I'm with you. I have said for a while, man, Brendan Donovan, Lars Nootbaar as a 1-2 punch at the top of the lineup. I get it that they're both lefties, but what I kind of like about both of these guys is they're not overly splitty necessarily,
Right.
right? Like, it's not like they can't hit left-handed pitching as well. Nolan Gorman was a guy that early on you thought, you don't want to expose him to lefties. And then as the conversation evolves, can Nolan Gorman become an everyday guy who can hit lefties too? Had some big moments against him last year. But I don't view Nootbaar or Donovan in that vein. I think those are two guys that you're not overly exposed by having them bunch up. Now, would it be nice to be able to get a lefty reliever that has to face a Goldy or an Arenado at some point? And maybe it's a little easier to do that if you sandwich a Nootbaar or another lefty between those two sluggers. Yeah, that's something that I guess you could do. But the reality for those two guys has been slow start anyway. So I wouldn't mind necessarily seeing what you're talking about, the two lefties at the top, and then slotting everybody else with a little bit of that stagger, because you can use a Nolan Gorman in the mixture of those righties to be able to offset. And if you've got a Burley in the lineup, he's somebody batting a little bit lower that can do that. So, yeah, I kind of like it. Stack the on base and let those two guys grind out some at-bats, maybe take some long ABs, and suddenly you've got a pitcher that's a little bit worn out when a Goldy or an Arenado comes to the plate.
Yeah, that's like my vision is to see these, 5, 6, 7 pitch at bats against Donovan and Nootbaar, and whether they get on base or not. That's the idea, is just to wear down these starting pitchers where they're exhausted by the fourth and fifth inning. And then you've got, I know they've been struggling in Arenado and Goldy, but the idea to get them off a worn out pitcher seems like a good idea to me. So it looks like we're in agreement there. What is your take on the Goldy and Arenado struggle so far this season? Are you somebody that's worried all that much about them right now? Or do you think it's just a matter of time before they snap out? Or is there some genuine concern that maybe they're just not who they were 2 years ago when both of them were, at the MVP season from Goldy and a top 3 finish for Arenado?
I think people try to sort of lump them in the same category where they say, these guys are getting a little bit older, and maybe that's just father time sort of catching up to guys. Well, Arenado is a number of years younger than Goldschmidt, so they're not exactly, at least supposed to be, in the same exact aging curve of their careers. Goldy is a guy that I know to be, like, he's still in excellent shape. He still had some pretty good numbers last year, despite a decline from an MVP season that, like, look, nobody is often going to repeat their MVP season unless you're Ohtani or something. It's not an easy thing to do. So I'm not looking at Goldschmidt as a guy that I think is just cooked at this point in his career, even though he is a little bit older on the age side compared to Nolan. But I also think Goldy historically has started a little bit slow. We've seen that from him this year. I'm not super panicked about him. When it comes to Arenado, I do think there is a little bit more of a concern, because when you trace it back to the middle of August last year, the power has really been sapped from his game. And I know it's maybe not totally fair, because Nolan is at least hitting for a batting average. He had the hitting streak, right? Like, he's still doing some things that are helping this team. But the way the Cardinals are built and the way they're truly constructed is, I think, to have an offense that ranks inside the top 10 in the league and is carried by some of these superstars that are making the big bucks. And for Arenado to truly be the guy that I think the Cardinals need him to be, he's got to hit some homers. And I know that's like a difficult thing to say, because I'm sitting here, never could have imagined making contact with a big league pitch, right? But when you look at what the Cardinals are and the way that they're built and constructed as a roster, it sort of does demand that sort of power impact from a guy like Nolan Arenado in the middle of the lineup. And when you look back and say, hey, August 19th is the last time this guy hit a homer, is it something still maybe with the back issues that he had late last year? Is it something else related to his swing? Is it just one of those things where he's a guy that sometimes takes a little bit of time to heat up with the weather as well? I'm not entirely sure. I don't think he's just totally toast, JD, but I also could look at it and say, are the days of Arenado just absolutely being an MVP candidate every year? Are those maybe something to temper expectations about? I don't know for sure that that's the case, but it is something that you kind of have in the back of your mind as you watch the days turn into now a couple of weeks of him maybe not being himself with the power production.
Now, one guy that's been on this roster that he struggled offensively as well, but he brings another aspect to this team that has kept him around. We'll see if he does keep on the roster, if he sticks around even longer. With Noot's return, some thoughts that might have an effect on what Victor Scott's position with the team may be. We're going to discuss his future next on Locked On Cardinals. Spring has sprung, and that means spring cleaning, whether that means stocking up on cleaning supplies or swapping out your winter clothes for new spring clothes. Make sure you're using Ibata and get real cash back with every purchase. Ibata is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies. What about the kids? We got toys, right? You got to buy those for them as well. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, perhaps a flight that you've been eyeing up, or maybe a fancy dinner. You got something you want to celebrate? Use it for that. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, you just add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or even gift cards. You can join over the 50 million users and earn cash back every time you shop from over 2,700 brands and retailers, which includes all your favorite grocery stores. We're talking Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and a whole lot more. Right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibata by using the code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. So go to the App Store, or you can go to Google Play, depends on what you like, and download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back. Use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's LOCKEDONMLB, and that's Ibata, in case you're curious how to spell that, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and have to turn down the volume because of the shouting? Then make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, which is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel, and it's programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube, or you can get it on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, up and running, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen every day. Leave your comments on YouTube down below, or you can also hit us both up on Twitter X anytime you want. Your feedback always welcome and encouraged. KMOV's Brendan Schaefer joining us today. Remember to give him a follow on Twitter X if you haven't done already, at bschaefer12 on Twitter X, and make sure you're following his podcast as well, man. If you can't get enough Cardinals, you come here, you go there. We're always talking ball. I want to talk about rookie center fielder and friend of the show, Victor Scott II, for a moment. We know that the plan was not to have him up on the roster. That wasn't the idea at the beginning of this year, but due to the rash of injuries that only the Cardinals would fall into, you lost Noot, you lost Edman, you lose Carlson, and the Cardinals felt that he had shown enough in spring training not to only warrant a spot on the roster, Brendan, but also to play every day. They made the point that, like, if he's going to stick around, he's in the lineup. Had a rough day in the field and that unfortunate base running mistake on Wednesday. We're not going to kill him for this. It happens. But some suggest that the Cardinals aren't doing him any favors as far as his development by having him on the major league roster right now. Where do you stand on all of this when it comes to Victor Scott?
I think in the long run, JD, I could understand the point where you look at a guy's on base percentage and his batting average and the numbers are low. And is he quite ready at this point in his career for a full season to take on major league pitching and keep his head above water? Maybe not. Now, it is still a small sample size. And look, a lot of the Cardinal players have been striking out a bunch or not hitting very well. And I think Victor's hit into a little bit of bad luck where if he had maybe legged out another infield hit or two or had a ball drop into the outfield that was caught, maybe we're not looking at his offense as being that big of a deal compared to, I mean, it is. It's jarring when you look up and see 091 for a guy's batting average. So I understand that point of view. I think specific to right now, because Nootbaar was coming back, and so people thought, well, maybe this is an opportunity for the Cardinals to make that move and get Victor some seasoning, and you throw Noot into center field. But I think the Cardinals have been very clear about not wanting Lars Nootbaar to play center field. They want him to be in a corner outfield spot because that's where they believe he best serves the team, and that's the skill set that they believe he has that most benefits his game. Now, what does that mean? You need somebody else with some good range and some defensive ability in center. The plan was Tommy Edman, but the best laid plans haven't really worked out there because of his injury and the wrist just taking a long time to recover. So for right now, I think you're left with, if you're going to stick Nootbaar in left and consider him a corner outfielder strictly, you stay with Victor Scott II, or maybe you go Michael Ciani in a bigger role, but the Cardinals really think he's ready for that everyday opportunity. I think specific to Wednesday, yes, the two things that Victor is supposed to be great at, fielding and base running, he had a flub in both of those areas, and yeah, it cost the Cardinals in that game. But if you're worried about this guy's development and having him maybe take this a little bit too hard if the MLB debut doesn't go the way that he's hoping, I think the way to make sure you do that is by demoting him after the worst game of his season. Like, that's not something that anybody wants to wear any more, difficult than they have to. I also lost my gig because of it. So the Cardinals, I think, did the right thing right now to say, look, if Wilson's ready to catch again, Pages probably isn't going to see much time anyway behind the plate. So let's go ahead and stand behind Victor Scott and maybe give him that runway of a couple more weeks to say, hey, we know you had a bad game. We know it hasn't been the way offensively you wanted it to go so far, but we believe in you. And if 2 weeks from now it's still not working out, maybe that coincides with Tommy Edman or Dylan Carlson returning, and those are guys that you feel a little bit more comfortable in center. So is it ideal? No, I understand the numbers aren't great for Victor, but I also think he's a guy that can play through some of this and can fight through some of this with the personality and just the moxie that he has. Let's just give him a little bit of time, and if it's not looking good at the end of the month, maybe then you say, hey, we really appreciate what you did. We know that you have a bright future. Go down to Memphis, work on this and this, and we'll see you in August. I mean, that could be a reality for what happens for Victor right now. I just really hope he takes off and says, look, I know Wednesday wasn't my best day. I'm going to show people that I can recover from a mistake and I can be my best self on this road trip. I think that's what Cardinals fans would like to see too.
Yeah, and we had Jeff Jones on the show yesterday, and he was like, I mean, this is going to be like his worst game of his career, probably, right? So, I mean, it's not like something this is going to continuously happen with Victor over and over. I mean, he's looked outstanding in center field, and yeah, I agree with you. It would have been a real extra kick in the groin there to also send you down after the one game that you did have some mistakes in. That I feel like that would have been a mistake. And I guess it also comes to the question too is how do you feel if you're the manager? Would you rather have what you would consider your elite defensive outfield with some offensive upside, or do you want the better offensive outfield who isn't quite as good defensively if you did decide at some point to move Nootbaar to center field, which we know he's capable of playing center field? But I've been the guy that's been saying, when it comes to this pitching staff, I need the best outfield I can possibly have out there. Like I will take the mistakes as far as, not being able to hit the ball on the ground as much. Maybe we bring in Lou Brown to make him do push-ups every time he pops it up or something. But I think that is the best way to go as far as to be a winning team altogether is by keeping Victor in center field.
It's the pitching staff comment that you made that I think is a little bit underrated. Cardinals fans know what the staff is. They know it's been more pitch to contact, and we've heard the term swing and miss over the recent years. And it's like you can do that slowly, but you're not all of a sudden going to snap your fingers and take guys like Miles Mikolas and make him a swing and miss guy. It's just not really the way that he pitches. So he's going to be pitching to some contact. You bring in Kyle Gibson. He's going to be pitching to some contact as well. And even guys like, Lynn and Sonny Gray, those guys can be about 1K per inning type of guys, maybe a little bit more. We saw some good swing and miss from Lynn in his last outing. But yeah, on the whole, you've got guys, Palante's another example, on this pitching staff that, man, they are going to benefit from that defense. And hasn't that really been the Cardinal way? When they were being successful, they were doing it because of that sterling defense. And you kind of lost that a little bit last year, along with a lot of other things. But that was something that you did see decline. And I saw and heard from the way the Cardinals talked about it in the winter that they really wanted to be able to prioritize defense. But it was one of those things where they had to wait and make sure the roster would line up with that. And I think when they got Brandon Crawford, a lot of people were like, well, why did they do that? They wanted Tommy Edman to just be able to play center. And I get that Tommy's still not healthy, but view Victor Scott in that same way. They had to make sure that they had their bases covered elsewhere so they could go out and be a good defensive ball club. Could you put Newton center? And hey, is Alec Burleson having a nice series against the Phillies with 5 hits? And maybe you want to play him in left some more. Like, I can see all of these arguments, but the pitching staff is going to think it. Not only is the manager going to say, I like going out there with a good defensive lineup, your pitching staff, whether they say it or not out loud, is going to go, yeah, I like having those guys behind me that turn some of my hits that I allow into the gap. Those are actually outs. Pitchers are going to really appreciate that. And it shows up at the end of the day. Now, you got to score more than 3 runs. If this Cardinals team is going to win, that's, offense has got to come. But I also think that on paper, they do have a group that should be able to do that anyway, even if you're quote unquote sacrificing a little bit of offense by keeping a sterling defensive center fielder out there.
Now, the pitching staff has been a pleasant surprise. We're going to talk about what the Cardinals have done outside of just having a better defensive fielding behind them. We'll talk about what has led to better numbers so far. We'll do that next with Brendan Schaefer on Locked On Cardinals. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball, obviously, in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Not a lot of Major League Baseball yesterday because of weather and whatnot, but, they're back in action today. The whole weekend is going to be jam-packed with Major League Baseball. Of course, the Cardinals in action. They'll be in Arizona no worries about weather there because they have a roof and they can open it and close it as they will. So we know they're going to be playing ball. So you can bet on what you think the Cardinals are going to do this weekend. Do you think Steven Matt's going to have a good game tonight? How about Michaelis on Sunday? Do you think he's going to do all right? Make your bets. Put your money where your mouth is. Obviously, the Stanley Cup playoffs not too far off. Our Blues still in it. Still, we're hoping Vegas just face plants and they suck the rest of the way, and the Blues can somehow sneak in. Odds aren't great, but you can bet on that too if you want to. And of course, the Masters got underway yesterday. So when it comes to betting on golf, it's a lot of fun. I tell you what, I know a lot of people fall asleep watching golf on TV. I'm one of them. But when you got a little bit of money on it, it makes it a lot more interesting. Makes you want to stay up a little bit longer. So check it out for yourself. Get yourself onto the app right now. New customers get $150 in bonus bets. That's guaranteed, by the way. $150. Win or lose, bet on everything from slap shots, home runs, slam dunks. They got it all for you on the app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet an automatic win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Also brought to you by LinkedIn. Are you struggling to close deals? B2B selling is tougher than ever, and that's why I want to tell you about LinkedIn Sales Navigator. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high-value customers, drive higher revenue, and increase sales performance. Sales Navigator helps you target the right buyers, surface key signals such as job changes or which accounts you should prioritize, and shows you hidden allies so that you can find those buyers that are most likely to convert. Fueled by LinkedIn's 1 billion member platform, Sales Navigator gives you the most up-to-date first-party data, enabling you to unlock conversations with the people that matter. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon. That is linkedin.com/lockedon for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/lockedon to get started. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Once again, Brendan Schaefer, Cardinals writer for KMOV Channel 4, and of course also podcast host himself. If you haven't checked him out yet, we got his podcast and his work linked in the show notes and in the comments down below. So we'll have that for you. Just click the link and you can listen to what else Brendan has to offer you when it comes to his writings and his opinions. But I'm glad you're here today, man. It's great talking ball with you. Pitching. How many times did we hear that? It was the motto of the offseason from John Mozeliak, and they made a ton of additions. We know that to not only the starting rotation, but also the bullpen. Not the names maybe everybody wanted because we're very greedy and we think we should buy everybody, and we don't ever. So I don't know why people's expectations were as high as they were, but the turnover was large nonetheless. Now some injuries have popped up. A few of those names like Sonny Gray, Keenan Middleton, Riley O'Brien, but overall the staff has looked pretty good. So far, I think most people would say job well done from everybody involved. And in your opinion, what are some of the reasons? We brought up the defense obviously has been way better than it was last year, but what are some other reasons that maybe this pitching staff is better than they were last year?
Well, I do think the personnel differences matter to some extent. Like Sonny Gray, I know we've only seen one game from him, but he looked like we expect Sonny Gray to look. I think he's going to be a really good addition toward the top of the rotation. And Lance Lynn, honestly, I don't know what people were necessarily expecting. They might have looked at last year's numbers and said, "Oh, pretty high ERA. Maybe this guy's sort of over the hill." I never really got that sense from last year. I honestly got more of a sense that if you looked at what was going on with the White Sox, a lot of guys weren't having success over there, and it maybe wasn't a great environment to succeed. And so he kind of got out of that. He's got something to prove with a chip on his shoulder, and he's kind of back to doing Lance Lynn things. So if you had mentally cataloged him as, oh, he's like a number 5 in the rotation, maybe he's really more like a solid number 3. Miles Michaelis is always going to benefit from better defense behind him, and I think he's gotten that so far with a couple of quality starts in a row. On Steven Matz, I think they did a really nice job in spring of bringing him along slowly. Let the pace sort of dictate. And you want to have Steven Matz be able to throw a maximum 100 pitches like everybody else. But if you have to have him on a pitch count and you get him healthy and you can keep him that way, I think that's honestly to the Cardinals' benefit. And so they've been willing to sort of play ball with that when it comes to Steven Matz. And then Kyle Gibson even had one really good start, had one that wasn't so good where, yeah, you lost the game in the first inning, basically. But you don't think it matters that he goes 6 innings and allows the bullpen for that Philly series to end up being rested and ready to go, despite having a guy only be able to throw 64 pitches on Tuesday? Like, again, they knew they were going to be up against it a little bit with Sonny Gray's limitation. And so it was pretty important for Kyle Gibson to go out and do what he did. Now, did the Cardinals win the Philly series? No, but I don't think it's because the bullpen wasn't rested or able to contribute. It was more because they had 3 games where they scored 3 runs. And when those are the circumstances, it's nice to be able to at least win one of them. So I just look at the personnel and you went 1 through 5 right there and go, yeah, that's honestly, it makes sense why they're doing a little bit better. And I just think when you have a more rested bullpen and you're not quite asking as much from them, those guys are going to look better too. So I think you do have better personnel, but you've also got a bullpen that's in a better position to succeed when guys are at least getting you through 5 innings and sometimes 6 and 7 when it comes to the rotation.
That Kyle Gibson start where that first inning, have you heard or seen anything where perhaps he might have been tipping pitches in that first inning? Because that's something that started to creep around yesterday. I was like, ooh, maybe the Marlins did have a little idea of what was coming.
And that is a game, that Sunday game. I was not actually covering that game, so I don't know if anything was said in the clubhouse or what was said after the fact, but certainly you could see the way that it lined up. He gives up 2 3-run home runs in the first inning, and then you're able to suddenly get through 5 more without having much of an issue at all.
Yeah.
Again, like, at least reading the tea leaves, you could see how that might have made sense. And if that was the case, honestly should be encouraging to Cardinals fans, because it would mean that if that happened, they caught it after about an inning, and then he went on to be able to finish the outing. And other than the inning where he was allegedly potentially having that situation going on, he's looked pretty good so far this year. So I'll be curious to see for Kyle Gibson what happens in the next outing. And if he's back to looking good again, you might say, yeah, there might have been something to that where they were picking up on something he was doing and quickly it was addressed, which, again, if that was the case, I don't know for sure that it was, but if it was, credit to the staff, right? I know Cardinals fans sometimes look at the coaching staff and say, what are they there for? What are they? Maybe that would be an example, right? Of somebody coming up and saying, hey, you're kind of doing this for the curve, whatever it would have been. That would be something where you might have to give a hat tip there that they were able to catch it quickly. And honestly, there'll be a Cardinal fan in the comment here that says, should have caught it after the first home run. But, maybe like, what can we do, right? Some of the times something happens, right? So that's kind of my thought. If it was going on, maybe not the worst thing in the world, because you find out that, hey, they caught it and it's something they can be aware of moving forward.
Yeah, because something changed, because it was night and day on how the Marlins were hitting after that first inning. They picked up 1 run in that next inning against him, but after that, I mean, Gibson was shutting everybody down. So it was really nice to see, and very much encouraging. And like,
JD, you called him Gibby. That was right. That was proper. I'm Team Gibby over here. So I like it. I heard it. I like it. Go with it, my friend.
But yeah, it was really nice to see him get through those 6 innings. And like you mentioned, it was something that set them up to do well in that Philly series. It didn't work out the way they wanted to. They ended up losing 2 of 3, but it put them in a good spot where that last year would have like screwed them up for that whole series and possibly the rest going into this weekend if they didn't have the day off yesterday. So it was really important. Another thing I wanted to bring up, how great is it seeing Lance Lynn on the mound, and somebody who is as, I don't know how to expressive is a way to talk about that. Like, seeing him get upset because people were bunting against him was awesome. Fantastic. I love seeing emotion. I love seeing Jojo Romero's emotion the other night. They talked about clubhouse culture this offseason and how things, maybe weren't so great behind closed doors last year. And you're seeing a team that so far to me has shown a lot of emotion, and it's something as a fan I can get behind big time.
Yeah, I mean, you've got enough of those pieces and those types of personalities now, I think, at the clubhouse that it gives you a little bit of an edge. Teams need an edge, right? And a guy that's in the position that Lance Lynn is in, where you had a need on the pitching staff and you also had maybe a need or a desire for that sort of edge within your clubhouse and out on the playing surface, I think Lance Lynn was a good fit for this Cardinals team for those exact reasons. And yeah, it's like he hasn't missed a beat, right? It's like the last time he was here was like 2018 or whatever it was. It's like nothing has changed in the 6 or so years that he's been gone, and he's just back to doing Lance Lynn things. And I know Cardinal Nation, after a year like last year, they're kind of vibing off that. They're feeding off that and enjoying seeing it play out. And I think that the Cardinal teammates of Lance Lynn are as well.
Let's get your thoughts on this weekend series before we wrap things up. Diamondbacks 6-7 at the moment. So if people are out there and they're disappointed in what has happened with the Cardinals so far, go ahead and go look at the pennant winners over in the NL West. They're 6-7 too. So it's not like things are going perfectly for them. Your thoughts on this weekend and what you expect to see out of the Cardinals going up against Arizona?
It seems like sometimes, JD, they go out to Arizona, and those old boys from the NL West that are now in the birds on the bat, they tend to have good series sometimes. I'm talking about Goldy and Arenado. This might be a series where you get out there with the roof, time stops, right? You go back to the times when you were, on obviously opposite teams, but just wrecking the NL West at the same time. Maybe this is a series where they get those two guys going. I think if that's the case, Cardinals fans are going to come out of the weekend feeling really good. Obviously, got to keep an eye on what's going on with the rotation. What are we going to get and see from Steven Matz tonight, taking on Brandon Pfaadt? Like, that's going to be an interesting matchup. You got Gibby Saturday, Michaelis Sunday. Like, you want to keep getting those 5, 6, and maybe on occasion 7-inning performances from the rotation. Obviously, with the off day on Thursday coming into the series, the bullpen should be ready to go. But I am really looking to the offense to see if they're able to kind of turn things around, get the long ball going a little bit from those guys that bat in the middle of the order. Maybe have a Noot around if he's able to get off to a hot start, can energize the rest of the team. It's the offense that I'll be watching primarily, JD, this weekend. Can that group do what they were kind of foretold to do and hey, carry this team the way that we know that you can on paper? I think that's what I'll be kind of checking out when the Cardinals take on the D-backs.
Yeah, we would love to see something other than a 3 in the run scored column. It's
not a 0. That doesn't mean you have a 2. Like we're kind of talking about more than 3, right? That's kind of the name of the game.
Yeah, give me a 3 or a higher, and hopefully that'll add up to a couple of W's this weekend in the desert. All right. Well, Brendan Schaefer, I appreciate you joining us here today, man. Once again, check him out on the podcast, which we will have the link down below. Make sure you subscribe there as well. And then also make sure you check out his work as he does his writing for KMOV Channel 4. We'll have the link down there to, he just recently put something about Sonny Gray out. I read that the other day. So make sure you guys are checking it out and following Brendan Schaefer on Twitter X at B Schaefer, which, by the way, we should spell that for our audio listeners only.
Tough, right?
Because not all of us are great spellers, Brendan.
Yeah, I got you. It's at B Schaefer 12, BSCHAEFFER 12. And honestly, it's youtube.com/at BSchaefer12 too. Same thing for the podcast on YouTube and Twitter. So as long as you can spell my name, you'll be able to find me. Granted, that's easier said than done.
What does the 12 mean in your handle?
It's simply the high school graduation year for your boy. So that's,
right.
Tell you my age with that. But yeah, graduated high school in 2012. And honestly, it was one of those things where I think 2011 is when I was picking up Twitter for the first time, and at B Schaefer was taken. So I had to add some numbers or do something to it to be able to have my handle. I got to pay that guy for his handle or something. But at this point, everybody knows me with the 12. So we just kind of let it be.
I was hoping maybe you were a big Aaron Miles fan or something like that.
You know what? You gotta love Aaron Miles, but that was not the specific reason. No, if anything, I would have done B Schaefer 7. I was a big JD Drew guy as a kid, so you'll learn a little bit more about me there.
I got you. All right, man. Well, give him a follow on all of the platforms and make sure you're checking him out this weekend. I'm sure he'll have plenty of content for you when it comes to talking about the Cardinals and this series. Thank you guys for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen every day. If you haven't already, give us a follow as well on Twitter, X at @LO_Cardinals and at JD Sports Radio. Like and subscribe on YouTube and help our channel and love for the Cardinals grow. You guys are the best fans of baseball for a reason, and we'll see you next time on Locked On Cardinals. Thanks, Brendan.
Appreciate you, man.